Hey everyone, my name's Spencer, and today we're in the final week of our series called Thoughts and Prayers. We've been talking about how the thoughts we all have about, you guessed it, prayer. And the idea of prayer seems nice, but it also can be kind of intimidating. Prayer is one of the main ways that we can connect with God, like actually God. So no pressure, right? Something about that can make prayer feel difficult or easy to get wrong. And for a long time, that's how I felt about prayer. Like I was going to be put on the spot and told to pray out loud at a moment when the stakes were high and that I just couldn't get it right, that I wouldn't say all the right words. Or maybe your story is you've tried to pray, even for like 5 minutes, and it just seems like an eternity. Or maybe you've tried to pray before you go to sleep, but your mind just wanders. If that's you, I totally get it. But I also want you to know I've found something that has helped me a ton when it comes to praying, and it could help you out as well. The whole idea begins with a cell phone. I know you guys all have those. And so, how many of you have ever seen an old corded phone before? Maybe your grandparents have one of these that's connected to the wall. And I can't even believe these things used to be normal, like in every single household. You literally were tied to the wall. You couldn't just walk away. And so if you're thinking, that sounds awful, you're exactly right. Yes, talking on the phone back then was still possible, but nothing else you were able to do because one landline did everything. You could only receive calls and make calls on one single phone. And most people treat prayer like a landline. We only use it to do one thing, the help me prayer. You know the ones. The here's what I want, could you help me get prayers? Or the fix my situation prayers. You might not even consider yourself religious and have maybe taught yourself letting out a help in the moment of unexpected danger. This is landline prayer, because it's only the one thing about what God can do for us. And listen, everybody has said this kind of prayer. You don't have to be a Christian to pray these kinds of prayers. You just have to be in some kind of trouble. Oh, don't get me wrong. God can handle all of our desperate cries for help. God's cool with your cries for rescue. God's not mad being approached this way, but that is just one way to see prayer. Now, many of you have seen cell phones before. You may have one in your pocket right now. You may have it in your hands right now on it. So if you do, get off your phone. But if you've treated a smartphone the same way that you treat landlines, you wouldn't be getting the most out of it. I mean, a smartphone can make a phone call, but it would be a total waste if that's the only way that you used it. Well, I only use it for one thing when you can use it as a phone, a camera, a way to text, to order food, search the internet, watch videos, play games, and get directions. It's all at our fingertips. If I were to ask you which one's better, a landline or a smartphone, it would be a super easy answer. The same is about prayer. And I want you to see prayer like a smartphone. Like there is so much more prayer that you can do, and you'll enjoy it more that way. Of course, if you don't know how to use a smartphone, it doesn't matter what it's capable of. Even though it's more available at your fingertips, you'll never experience it fully. And the same is true for prayer. What if we are missing out because we only treat prayer this one way? Prayer is more than just our emergency go-to, but if it's all we've ever used it for, we may be missing out. So, how do we start treating prayer like something more? So I want to look at something Jesus said about prayer in the most famous message that he's ever given, called the Sermon on the Mount. And in this passage, Jesus is telling us how to pray. He starts by saying this. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. That's in Matthew 6. Now, some of you may have never heard this before, and that's totally okay. It's called the Lord's Prayer, and it's super popular around churches all over the world. And Christians have also memorized it and pray it pretty regularly as well. And so the thing that makes it so cool is that Jesus himself is literally telling us how to pray. We don't have to guess. Jesus gives us the how, but before we break down those verses, it's important to note that before Jesus shared this prayer, he pointed out some other things about praying while he was giving his sermon. He encouraged us to be real, to avoid praying for the sake of impressing other people. Then he encouraged us to be honest, just like we talked about last week. God already knows how we feel before we say it, so why not just be honest when we're praying? Finally, he encouraged us to be consistent, to not just pray once and walk away, but to make it a part of our everyday lives. We want to pray first in all that we do. And so be real. Be honest, be consistent. That's what Jesus wants behind our prayers. You see, Jesus gives us this prayer not only to show us our heart, but he shows us to give us an idea of the how. When we're not sure what to do or to say, or we think that we're doing it wrong, Jesus gives us this to be the answer to all of it. So it boils down to 3 simple words: thanks, please, and sorry. Jesus began the Lord's Prayer by speaking words of thanks, by talking about how God's greatness and showing his gratitude for how holy and awesome God is. Then, he laid his request before God, asking God to do things like provide and forgive. Finally, he took a moment to ask for God's forgiveness, to confess or own up to any mistakes or wrongdoings, and ask God to forgive him of those things. Of course, Jesus was perfect and without sin, but he was giving us an example of how to include the same sorry in our own prayers when we feel like we've messed up. Thanks, please, sorry. It's as simple as that. Some days, those may be the only words that you have to pray. Other days, you may have more than just those 3 words. And while there's really not a formula for doing any prayers right, you might start by using those 3 words, kind of like an outline. Tell God what you're thankful for. Then express your needs to God. And finally, let him know that you're sorry about you and what you've done in the past and where you need forgiveness. Listen, this is just a starting place. The more you pray, the more comfortable you'll become with prayer. If you just want to tell God about your day or the person you wish you would notice in your geometry class or how annoying your little brother is, God wants to hear it. God is for you and loves you, and nothing you want to talk about is off limits with God. God wants to know you and wants to give you direction in life, and so keep the conversation going. See, here's the thing we really want you to understand about prayer. It's not always about the words you say, but the way that you pray. And Jesus has told us how. And so whether you pray a lot or just a little bit, whether it's a frustrating experience or a confusing one, you have a way forward. God is so interested in connecting with you. And so whether you do things the right way or the wrong way, God wants what's best for you through prayer. Because the point is that he wants you to find whatever way possible to pray to him. No matter how you practice praying, no matter what form it takes, the best thing you can decide to do is this: commit to it. So this week, try making that commitment. Even if it's just 2 minutes on the way to school or 5 minutes before bed, commit to giving a prayer a try this week, to trying to find your way to pray. I think as soon as you do this, you'll be surprised how quickly your connection to God grows. See, one of the things that we can make the process of learning prayer so much easier is knowing that you aren't alone in trying to figure it out. Everyone is doing what they can to find the way that works for them, which is why small groups are so important. You can be surrounded by people who are trying to figure it out just like you are, and encourage one another to remember that there is a God who listens and that God is accessible to all of us. So as you head into your group today, think about the answer to this question. If you were sure God was listening, what would you say?